I'm Mo. Last year I did a video called 20 books that I found out about in 2020 but I want to read in 2021, and they were all books that I had heard about during my first year of BookTube and wanted to try and find, to keep my eye out for, and to read in 2021. We are fast approaching the end of 2021, and I decided to make a list of books, 21 books that I found out about in 2021 that I want to read in 2022. The first list of books, the books from 2020, were pretty randomly chosen. They were books that I had heard about, they were getting a lot of BookTube buzz, or they were books that were released earlier but seemed really interesting to me and I had never heard about before joining BookTube. For the books that I found out about in 2021, I definitely picked more books that are more my style. They are still books that are not necessarily new in 2021, that didn't necessarily come out in 2021. There's backlist books, there's classic books, there's a range of books that seem interesting to me and that I would like to read in 2022. In a lot of the instances, I don't know a lot about these books, and just like the video from last year, I didn't bring anything except my list with me today, so I'm only going to read you off the books that I want to try to read in 2022. I don't super go out of my way to find these books. I end up picking them up at used book sales, in used bookstores, at little free libraries, or sometimes I do occasionally purchase them on used book sites. The first book that I found out about in 2021 that I would like to read in 2022 is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Ning Vo. This is a companion slash retelling of The Great Gatsby. I know The Great Gatsby can be a little bit controversial. A lot of people don't like that classic, but I personally love that classic and I would be really excited to hear a different perspective on that story with a touch of magic involved. Book number 2 is Detransitioned Baby by Tori Peters. This is a book about a trans woman who is detransitioning back to a man, his girlfriend, and his boss that he's been sleeping with, and how they kind of form a family. Book number 3 is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I read Yoko Ogawa's The Housekeeper and the Professor earlier this year and I really enjoyed her writing style. I think this book about an alternate timeline where things are disappearing from people's memory and things are taken away from people's memory sounds really cool. Book number 4 is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. I've heard some good things about Sarah Perry's work. I don't actually know what this is about. It might be magical realism, it might be historical fiction, it might be a combination of the two, but people who love Sarah Perry really like her work and she seems like a literary writer that I might enjoy as well. Book number 5 is Something New Under the Sun by Alexandra Clement. I heard CJ Reads talk about this one. It is a climate crisis fiction book and it just sounded really interesting at the time. I haven't gotten into a lot of dour science climate fiction yet. I haven't read a lot of cli-fi books because I think they will be kind of a downer for me, but I'm interested in reading them and maybe that's a genre I would really enjoy. This seemed like as good a place to start as any. Also, the synopsis that she said kind of reminded me of one of my all-time favorite books, Bunny Modern, so I don't know if that's true or not, but there's something linked in my mind about those two books, and hopefully since I liked the one, I'll like Something New Under the Sun. Book number 6 is Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson. This was recommended by Books and Lala when she read books by authors that lived around where she lives in Canada. And there was just something about the way she described this one that sounded really interesting. It is, I think, an Indigenous author. I would love to read more books by Canadian authors in general. The 7th book on this list was shortlisted for, I believe, the International Booker Prize, and that is The Employees by Olga Rav? I'm not sure. I wrote it down. I can't read my writing. The Employees is a short book about people who work, I believe, on a spaceship in the future. So it has a sci-fi element, but it also has kind of a workforce element. It sounded like a really interesting book. There's a lot of people who really enjoyed it. It's one that I want to keep my eye out for. Since it was shortlisted for a prize, I'm hoping that this is one that will come up as a used book pretty easily. The 8th book on my list of 21 books that I found out about in 2021 but want to read in 2022 is Mrs. Death by Selena Godden. I've been hearing about this one basically all year in 2021, and it just sounds really interesting. It's about a personification of death. I believe she's an old lady, and it's about someone named Wolf who is interviewing her. It's extremely short. I thought for a long time that this book was long, that was like a long novel, but it's actually more of a novella, so I'm really interested to try and find this one in 2022. The 9th book on this list is The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. This is semi-based on a true story of men who are working at a lighthouse who disappear. It's told in two storylines where there is the wives of the men in the present day and then the men who disappeared and how their storylines come together. I don't love dual storylines and dual timelines, but this one just sounded like a really interesting literary mystery and another gorgeous cover, and it seems like a book that I could be really into. Number 10 on this list is Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. Actually, I'm interested in a lot of Samantha Schweblin's books. She wrote Fever Dream, and that sounds like a really interesting book. Little Eyes is about a time in the not too distant future where people have developed little Furby-like toys that they can either have and live with them or can control. So you're either a person who's watching life go by or you're a person who the little Furby creature watches your life go by. 11 on this list was also recommended by Books and Lala, and this is a classic. It's called Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I really don't know anything about this except that Zora Neale Hurston, I believe, is a Black author. This is considered a classic. I think it does have something to do with religion, but I think ultimately it's more of a coming-of-age story. Don't quote me on that because I'm really not sure. This is one, because it's a classic, I think I'll be able to find maybe in a little free library or maybe in a used bookstore, so I'm going to keep my eye out. Next up is Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. There's, again, quite a few books by Sarah Gailey that I'm interested in reading. This is one of her earlier books, and it's about a post-apocalyptic future when there is no easy communication, so people have brought back the Pony Express, essentially, and mail is delivered by a group of horse-riding women postal workers. So I love the post office. I don't know if you know this about me, but my dream was always to be a letter carrier. So any books that have anything that touches on things to do with the post office and the postal systems, I really enjoy. I loved that aspect of The Crying of Lot 49, and I'm super excited to see what Upright Women Wanted has to say about that. 13th book on this list is The Mermaid of Black Conk, and that was by Monique Raffi. I had heard several things about this, and I know some booktubers that I love have read it. Maria from MH Books read this one. I'm super interested to get to it. It's kind of a folktale creation story, I think. Number 14 is a classic sci-fi, and that is The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. I had never heard of this classic sci-fi author. I believe he was writing in the very early 1900s or possibly the late 1800s, but maybe he's a modern classicist. I am not sure. But this is a sci-fi about an alien invasion. 15 on this list is Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This book follows a young lady who needs to pay for medical bills for her family, so she joins some medical trials, but not all is as it seems. This is sci-fi, horror, thriller, and has a lot to do with poverty and a Black experience, and it sounds like quite a gripping book. A book that I'm super interested in getting to ever since I heard about it is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. This is a story about post-Katrina New Orleans, and I love New Orleans and I love to read books about New Orleans. This one sounds quite heavy-hitting and kind of a severe literary novel, so it might not exactly be the normal kind of book that I read, but everything I hear about Jesmyn Ward as an author sounds amazing, and I'm really excited to pick this one up. I had the chance to pick up the next book and I passed it up, and I'm very sad about it. At one of my favorite used bookstores in 2021, I saw Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. I am very interested in a lot of Ottessa Moshfegh's books, but that one is one of her earlier books and it is a thriller. I thought that sounded really interesting and I saw it at the bookshop. I didn't get it, and then when I went back to get it, it was gone. So that is like a lost grail book for me right now. I really want to get my hands on a copy of Eileen. The next book won the Woman's Prize, and before that I was super intrigued to read this one because no one can accurately describe it on BookTube, or it doesn't seem like it, so I think I'd really love to read Paranessie by Susanna Clarke. This is actually a short book as well, which makes me want to read it even more. This One Sky Day. This book has another title in the American version. On this fictional island, I believe they're having some sort of celebration, and during this celebration, something otherworldly happens and people start developing different powers and abilities, and this follows this one sky day in their lives. Kind of a sidestep for me, I would really, really like to read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead in 2022. This is kind of a straightforward academic thriller. I think it would be considered dark academia, but it is not magical as far as I know, and I believe it's about a bunch of college students who something happens to, and then you're following them in the future as well, or in the present as well. Again, I don't know about the dual timelines, but the title of this book and just the vibes that I get from seeing it make me really want to read it. The last book that I'm going to talk about today, and the last book on my 21 books that I found out about in 2021, but I want to read in 2022, is Comfort Me with Apples. This is a short horror book, and it was on the Goodreads Best of Horror list. It did not win, but again, there's something about the cover of this book, there's something about the vibe of this book. It's extremely short. It makes me want to pick it up. Let me know which book you found out about in 2021, which one you would most like to read in 2022, and we'll check back at the end of the year to find out how many of these I actually got to. You can see my 20 books that I found out about in 2020 that I want to read in 2021 in the description box below. I'll link the original video and I'll link the update to tell you how many of those books I actually got to in 2021. Thanks so much for joining me today.